the Court of Appeal has just struck down the use of the Emergencies Act. We all knew it wasn't justified, but now we've had 2 court decisions in a row striking it down. That being said, I am personally a little bit concerned when it hits the Supreme Court, because we know it's going to get appealed, when you have the Chief Justice already out on record condemning the convoy, condemning anyone that was disagreeing with the government. I'm still optimistic, though, because if any of you have taken the time to read that judgment, it was scathing, it was direct, and it was quite clear. It was not useful. It was not appropriate. It should never have been enacted. On to our next speaker. Dr. Hoffe, he's a family physician who's worked in Linton, BC since 1993. I'm trying to remember where I was in 1993. High school? No, I think I was just starting university in 1993. Shortly after the start of the COVID vaccine rollout, he drew public attention by alerting medical authorities to serious vaccine injuries that he was seeing in his patients. He was doing what we'd want every family physician, and there's not enough of them in this province, to do: advocate for their patients. What was the result? He was gagged, threatened, and publicly discredited by the medical authorities and placed under investigation. Now, after 30 years of having worked as a physician, he was fired from the ER by Interior Health for stating a simple fact, that a person with natural immunity to COVID did not need to be vaccinated. The College of Physicians and Surgeons of BC brought disciplinary charges against him for professional misconduct for discussing the harms done by the COVID vaccinations. After 4 years, it's amazing that 4 years what can happen. The college dropped their professional misconduct case just before it was supposed to go to trial. That's one piece of good news, but there's still 4 years of problem there, and he's going to be talking about that. And now Dr. Hoffe remains a strong advocate for patient safety, freedom of speech, and the pursuit of the truth. So let's have a big, warm applause.
Well, thank you for coming out this evening. It's a joy to be here. It's lovely to be in Victoria. It's certainly a lot warmer here than it is in the interior, as a previous speaker mentioned, coming from the prairies. So, in the introduction, it gave a little snapshot of perhaps who I am and why I'm here. And I'm here, I think, essentially because I got into trouble. And I got into trouble for speaking truth. Now, I wanted to talk about truth because truth is indeed a lonely warrior, but it is our most powerful ally. Because, as the introduction mentioned, well, maybe I should just for some of you who don't maybe know a little bit about me. When I've been a family doctor for now, 33 years in Canada, and I like small communities because I can really get to know my patients well. And I really care for them, and I literally have gone from delivering babies to helping grandma ease out of this life. And when I saw what the government was doing to my patients, who are mostly First Nations, I was very upset. And so I wrote to Bonnie Henry to tell her what her injections were doing to my patients. And her response was firstly to put me in charge of a vaccine expert who assured me that everything that I was seeing were coincidences and couldn't be from the vaccine. And secondly, told me that I was putting people at risk by causing vaccine hesitancy. So they put me under investigation because they said I was guilty of professional misconduct. Interior Health told me that I was not allowed to say anything negative about the vaccines, and that they were reporting my basically questioning the safety of it to the college as professional misconduct. So they laid charges against me, and literally, I mean, many of you have seen what has happened to many other doctors across Canada who lost their licenses and were given enormous fines. And their fines were essentially, they would be basically told they had to pay the legal fees of the college. And the college was so determined to take me down, they had 7 lawyers working on my case. And my lawyer, Lee Turner, estimated that they had probably spent, by the time they eventually dropped the charges, $1 million on me. So when they dropped the charges shortly before my trial, and the reason why they did that was because my lawyer, Lee Turner, who lives in Kelowna, had accumulated 8 brilliant world experts to deal with each of the areas of accusation against me. And I had advocated for people using ivermectin to keep them out of hospital, and they considered that misinformation. I had spoken about the neurological injuries that I saw firsthand in my own patients, and that was misinformation. I had spoken about the high number of vaccine deaths. Unfortunately, in my patients, I only had one patient who died suddenly and unexpectedly after his COVID shot. Literally, he was sitting on the side of the bed talking to his wife and just keeled over and died. And when I reported his vaccine injury to Interior Health, they told me it wasn't from the vaccine, it was a coincidence. And there was no other medical explanation for his death. And I ultimately submitted 14 vaccine injury reports, because that's all they said. Firstly, these are not from the vaccine, but just submit the reports. So I submitted the reports, and every single one of them was denied by Interior Health. They said, no, these are not from the vaccine. These are all coincidences. So I discovered that the vaccine injury reporting system was censored by the government. You couldn't report them, and that's how they could quote these numbers about how incredibly rare the vaccine injuries were. But we now know that Bonnie Henry lied to the people of BC on a day when she told the people of BC that the rate of vaccine injuries, and we've got this from Freedom of Information from her own emails that we now have, that she told the people of BC that the rate of vaccine injuries from the COVID shots was approximately the same as the flu shot. And she had been informed that morning that it was an 87 times higher rate of vaccine injuries from the COVID shots. And yet that literally 2 hours later, she lied straight-faced to the people of this province. These are the people, and she was given the Order of Canada.
Off with her head!
So this is what we're up against. But the fact that I am standing here and I still have a medical license and I can still work is a testimony to the importance of perseverance and of clinging to the truth. Truth is our most powerful ally. And these truckers were discredited, and of course the media did everything they could to slander them. But with the passage of time, that decision last Friday was so encouraging, because time and truth go hand in hand. And so we have yet to see, I haven't heard yet whether the government is going to appeal that decision, but if they do, I think that will be a strong signal that the Supreme Court is rigged. Because 2 courts have so far judged that use of the Emergencies Act was illegal and unconstitutional. And in the most recent decision, all 3 judges unanimously agreed that it was unconstitutional and illegal. So if they do appeal it and it goes to the Supreme Court, we will know that the Supreme Court is rigged. So I wanted to just speak briefly about what I believe the purpose of the pandemic was. Because we've now seen their playbook, and we need to understand it. You need to know your enemy. Unfortunately, the people who rule us are literally the enemies of this nation, because they are trying to take down the system. So, one of the key purposes that I believe of the pandemic was the same purpose for why we have cultural Marxism, and I'll talk about that, and the same purpose for why we have a climate crisis. It is the Great Reset. The Great Reset is what they will use to bring in the New World Order. King Charles, when he was Prince Charles, spoke about the New World Order, and he spoke about the Great Reset, I think more than 30 years ago. And almost every major national leader has spoken about the Great Reset at some time or another. And for anyone who doubts that the purpose of the pandemic had nothing to do with the Great Reset, Klaus Schwab, who was the founder and leader of the World Economic Forum, published a book in the first year of the pandemic called COVID-19, The Great Reset. So, how was COVID-19 going to contribute to the Great Reset? The first thing was through creating debt. Literally, it took little over a year for literally Trudeau to double the national debt of Canada. The amount of money that had been accumulated by every single prime minister in the entire history of Canada, he doubled it in just over a year through all his pandemic measures. And there was no evidence that there ever was a pandemic, because the number of people that were dying in Canada never changed. It never changed. So it was an imaginary pandemic. Flu disappeared, and it was all called COVID, and they told us about how many people were dying of it, but it was no different from usual. And the definition of a pandemic is a new, highly lethal disease that spreads around the world and causes a high number of deaths. Well, the deaths weren't there. So clearly, according to that definition, which was the traditional definition of the pandemic, it wasn't a pandemic. But nevertheless, it was used to create massive debt, not just in Canada, but literally in every nation on the planet. The second purpose of the pandemic was to reduce life expectancy and to reduce fertility. And that was one of the things that I was accused of misinformation, for trying to warn people about how, the fact that they were trying to force our children to have these shots. COVID was no risk to children. The fact that they had to have these shots to play hockey or to go on school field trips or to enroll at university and various things. In fact, to be vaccinated with a so-called vaccine, which even at that point had the worst safety record of any medical product in history. Nothing else had ever killed or maimed so many people in such a short space of time. And yet they were forcing these young people to have these shots to protect them against a disease that posed no risk to them. There was no other logical purpose other than it was to reduce fertility. Because we knew from the Pfizer biodistribution studies that one of the top destinations for those spike proteins was ovaries. And once you kill eggs in a woman's ovaries, her fertility is permanently impaired. Women don't make new eggs. All of the eggs that a baby girl is born with are made in her mother's womb when she is literally being formed in the womb. And if you can get anything, to get into any poison into her ovaries that knocks off half the eggs or kills the eggs or scars the ovaries, you will guarantee that her fertility is reduced. And we've now seen that with numbers coming out of, I think it's the Czech Republic, where they've compared vaccinated and unvaccinated women and showed that those who took the COVID vaccines have a 1/3 reduction in childbearing capacity. And Canada now is amongst the lowest fertility in the world. Do you know, Canada hasn't been able to sustain our own population since 1972. You need a population, you need a reproductive rate of 2.1 babies per woman for the population to stay the same. Canada hasn't been there since 1972, but it needs to be 2.1 to maintain the population. We're now at 1.2. So we are now amongst the lowest in the world. We are headed for a demographic winter where our population is literally in terminal decline. And that is why they're bringing in all of these immigrants from other countries that don't share our values or our cultural perspective, because it is the only way they can sustain the economy, because Canadians are not producing Canadians. And the vaccines will help that. The other ways that they've created debt, of course, for generations is through cultural Marxism. Cultural Marxism is the idea that all of humanity can be divided into two groups: oppressors and the oppressed. So men are the oppressors and women are the oppressed. Light-colored Caucasian people are oppressors, and people with dark skins are the oppressed. The colonialists are the oppressors, and the First Nations are the oppressed. Heterosexual people are the oppressors, and the LGBTQ alphabet soup are the oppressed. You divide up everyone into oppressors and the oppressed, and it fractures society. And of course, what the government does is they hand out funding to all these oppressed groups, whether they're Aboriginal or LGBTQ or whatever they might be, and it's just a way of leaking money. And of course, they give the money to all these other nations. When Canada gives money to third world countries, it's not just because they want to help them. It comes with strings attached that we will give you this money, but you have to have the equivalent of a SOGI curriculum in your educational system. And you have to legalize same-sex marriage. And you've got to have all of these things that create sexual perversion, which destroy families and reduce reproductive rates. Because if you can persuade young people to either be same-sex attracted or gender confused, they will not reproduce. It is biologically impossible. So that whole strategy is all about population reduction. It's not because they love LGBTQ people. It's about population reduction. It destroys families. And then, of course, the third way that they're bringing about the Great Reset is through the third way of debt creation, other than the pandemic and cultural Marxism, is the climate hysteria. And again, truth is our greatest ally. It is wonderful to see now that globally, the corporate world no longer seems to pretend that they believe the climate legend. It is amazing, and now for about 20 or 30 years, they've been pouring money into what they call green energy. Do you know that globally, if you take all the solar power that is produced and all the wind power that is produced, it is literally 2.5% of all the energy consumed. After pouring trillions of dollars into this so-called green energy, they've got up to 2.5%. So this whole idea that Carney has, that he wants to ban the sale of cars that are powered by fossil fuels in 10 years, in 2036, is impossible. The sale of electric vehicles in North America is about 7%. People don't want them. In the rural areas, they are completely impractical. In most of Canada that has a cold climate, they are completely impractical. Try and tow a trailer. You're not going anywhere. They are just ridiculous, but it creates debt. It creates massive debt. All of this green energy is incredibly expensive, and the purpose of the debt is to take down the currency. I watched it happening in Zimbabwe. I came from Southern Africa, where the government literally destroyed the currency through debt, and eventually their dollar was worth nothing. And that is where we're headed. They are trying to take down our currency to bring in that new world order with a digital currency through debt. If you can create enough debt, eventually it goes poof on a national scale. But individually, if you can have people in debt, and of course, the pandemic destroyed 130,000 businesses in Canada. That's what the lockdowns did, 130. So think of all the debt that created. It was all about debt creation. So, what can we do? What is our hope for the future? Well, our hope for the future is, first of all, that we see that the legal system is not all corrupt. The fact that they dropped the charges against me showed that you can actually beat them at their own game. The fact that that decision last Friday, which condemned the use of the Emergency Measures Act for a peaceful protest in Ottawa, shows that the legal system is not completely broken. Yes, it's very corrupted, and it is rigged in many ways, and the use of judicial notice through the pandemic showed that. And that's what they tried to do against me, but it didn't work because I had a really good lawyer. But truth is our greatest ally, and time and truth go hand in hand. But the other things that are important are perseverance. And the fact that I'm still standing here, and I'm here speaking to you after these crazy 6 years that we've had, is a testimony to the importance of perseverance. Freedom is never free. And the battle for freedom is a marathon, not a sprint. So we have to persevere. We have to be relentless in spreading truth. We must be courageous in standing against evil. We must reveal it wherever we can, and we will save this nation. Thank you.